Thank you for listening to the Bladder Battle Podcast special series, I See in the Dark. This series dives deep into the perplexing disease interstitial cystitis. This podcast is intended to bring awareness and create conversation around the illness by providing possible remedies, tips for managing the disease, how you can show support, and so much more. This podcast is not intended to be a medical alternative for physician care, nor to treat, cure, or prevent any illness or disease. Always consult with a physician for professional medical advice. Today, we are talking all about advocacy and starting the conversation around bladder health and chronic illnesses such as interstitial cystitis. So joining me today is blogger and bladder health advocate, Aoife Madden, to share her passion project and blog, B is for Bladder. So welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm very excited to learn more about your blog, your website. You have a lot of great information, and it's laid out in such an easy way to really access the different information. But before we get into that, I want to know your specific connection and background with bladder conditions.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed 2010, what are we now, 2020? Yes, about 10 years ago with, I know, losing track of the days, months, years. So diagnosed with Fowler syndrome, a chronic retention-based illness. It's urethral-based. I had urethral failure at the time, so I haven't passed urine naturally for 10 to 11 years. I used to IC, so with the small sort of intermittent catheters that I would sort of put in myself at the beginning. And that became so problematic that I went through a lot of different procedures and routes, surgeries. I had a mitrophonoff built, a neobladder formed and things like that to try and get me intermittent catheterizing through my belly button. That failed, so we're now on suprapubic catheter. So I use my suprapubic, which is indwelling all the time, it's tucked away. And that's how I wee. So just me and, my bladder condition and taking on the world every day. That's what it is.
Wow. I feel for you. Just to go through this for 10 years, that's a long time to be, battling this. So when did you decide to create B is for Bladder?
Yeah, so I guess it was always something that it was like a little idea growing just in the back of my mind really for years. And then last year, I was just like, right, I've got to do this. I felt at quite, positive space with my own condition to be able to try and offer something to other people who are going through similar sort of problems and maybe unite, us as a bladder community. That's why I sort of love what you're doing here as well, because I just think it's great, really. I feel like we're a bit of a forgotten illness and a lot of there's a lot of bowel charities and people doing a lot of work with Crohn's and bowel conditions. And I feel like bladder is just as prevalent, but just it's not highlighted enough. So I just wanted to make my mark really on the bladder front and offer support to others and create sort of, a welcoming, positive community surrounding bladder conditions.
Absolutely. I think that's incredible. And just as I'm doing with the podcast, so it's really great to get out. Yeah, it's really great to get out the information and just help everyone who is kind of lost because, like you said, it doesn't get enough attention. There's a lot of information out there, but you really have to dig for it. So I love it. And I love your layout of the website. So kind of touch on sort of the inspiration for the alphabet.
I guess, I'm a primary school teacher, so alphabet is something I do quite a lot in my day-to-day life. So it kind of just felt really natural to kind of go with that theme. But B is for Bladder was all, like, as I said, this idea was kind of, in the back of my mind for years. And it was always B is for Bladder. Like, I spoke about this 8-9 years ago going, I'd love to have my own little site, my own little radio show, my own little something. B is for Bladder, it's going to be themed around the alphabet. I don't know, it just kind of came from grew naturally, really. But I do think the alphabet was something that just seemed very simplistic and felt like easily accessible to all. I wanted to open the doors to those that maybe don't suffer with a bladder condition, but want to learn how to support those that do. And I felt like, alphabet was kind of an easy route into accessing everyone type thing.
Yeah, it's very easy to navigate your site. Can you kind of go through maybe some of your favorite letters and what you have designated to those letters? So, I mean, obviously we know B is for bladder, but what are some of the other blog posts on your site associated with some other letters of the alphabet?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed writing the L is for lockdown one during lockdown, because I'm sure you can empathise with this. Having chronic conditions, we've had to lock down at different parts of our life, and we've never made a big deal about it. Like, if I've had to isolate because of an illness, it just is what it is, and kind of crack on with it if I've had an infection or whatever. And then suddenly the whole world was isolating and locking down, and it was like, oh my God, this is the worst thing ever. Yeah, granted it is, but I looked on that with the different, tint within my glasses, thinking, well, hold on a minute, this is something I've had to do, and I'm sure many other patients or, people suffering with conditions have had to do different points in their life. So I just thought it was really relatable to me, but on a different level. And I noticed then once I wrote my blog post, there were so many others within the Spoonie and chronic health community that were writing similar sort of, things on their Instagram or Twitter. And I felt like it was something that we could all sing from the same hymn sheet with, so to speak. So that was a great one to write. But my favourite, I think, is Y is for young women, because I'm really passionate about helping, girls within their late teens, 20s, 30s, become comfortable with their body again after it's been through huge changes. So that one was one very close to my heart when, writing even now, talking about it. I think it's really important to me to get that message out there to young women. So yeah, the Y is for young women one, I think, is my favourite.
Yeah, I love that because, we both know that this disease affects more women than it does men. And that's not to exclude men from it, because obviously they feel their own struggle and their own pain. But being, a young female and myself having to go through such a different way of living your life and just having to think about using the restroom differently and to think about sex differently. It's very discouraging, and you don't have a great outlook on the rest of your life when you're in your, 20s and 30s and you're dealing with this. These are our reproductive years. And I think this illness makes us really question if we can even have kids, and just lots of things to really think about in the future. So I love that. I like to focus on that for sure.
Definitely. And I think it does, like, it takes I don't want to say takes the fun out of, but things like packing for a girl's holiday, like my toiletry bag looks completely different to everybody else's because of all the medical products and things. And I think it's not that it takes the fun out of going away with the girls, because of course that would still be a fun experience, but it puts a completely different slant on it that someone who didn't deal with these things every day wouldn't understand. And I think, especially being a young woman, I totally agree with you when you said about men having their own difficulties, etc. But being a young woman, and I think the pressure we put on ourselves to look and feel a certain way because of, body image through social media, magazines, etc. It almost felt like there wasn't a place for me with my catheter amongst that. So I'm glad that I've come to more of a place now at 27 that I could try and encourage other women to get to where I'm at, which is, I don't really care that the catheter's there. I'll wear the bikini, I'll wear the dress. It's part of me. And I hope that, chatting to young girls who go in and out of hospital now, I'm working quite closely with my local hospital to do a lot of work with them and young women that are diagnosed with bladder conditions. I'm hoping I can have an impact on their self-esteem and confidence going forward. So yeah, it's really important.
So I kind of want to touch on that a little bit. What type of conversations or program do you sort of implement in your local hospital? Do you do a lot of motivational speaking? Do you kind of go through your blog as a sort of resources for them? What are some things that you do when you go and visit?
Yeah. So So pre-COVID, I just started working a lot with young women who were ICing and struggling, like to sort of use the mirror, find their urethra, all that kind of stuff. Because I remember being like really floored by that at that age, thinking, oh my gosh, you must be joking me. I've got to put a mirror there and use this like lubricant gel and stick this thing up. Oh no, it all felt far too much. So I've done a lot of sort of breathing techniques with them and normalizing that part of your body. Because I think obviously with our urethra being so close to our vagina, it's a very private place. And even though you don't want to unprivatize it, you want to normalize it because you're going to have to look at it or deal with it every day, that area. So sort of a lot of, I guess a lot of sort of speaking with them, not necessarily public motivational speaking in that respect, but sitting down as small groups and discussing what it is that we're finding difficult and how we overcome that, and almost being a listening ear for them and a guide. So that's been good. I was going in every couple of weeks, really helping out with that, working with some of the nursing team, the bladder care nursing team there, and then some product, some companies that make some of the bladder products like Coloplast and Convatec. I've been in conversation with them about doing a bit of motivational speaking, more on a bigger level, going to conferences and things and talking to doctors as well about sort of their patient liaison and how a lot of these male doctors, with, you know, as much as they're great, they kind of don't get it being a woman. So I feel like I've got a great bit of experience to be able to help them do their job better. So we're working on a new way I can do that now, coming into post-COVID times, so to speak. So yeah, looking forward to getting stuck in with them really, and seeing their ideas. I'm currently waiting for a few consultants to get back to me now. I've got a meeting on the 1st of October going forward with how to help the medical community as well as the patient community.
Yeah. How did you get involved? How did this start? Were you contacted by some of the local doctors and professionals, the hospital? Did you pursue them? What was kind of your affiliation there?
Yeah, I did actually pursue them quite a bit, really. My current doctor, Dr. Viney, he's brilliant. He has looked at me a different way to other doctors have and has tried to understand where my pain and spasm, etc., comes from. So because of that, we've patented a new way of changing my catheter. So me and him have been in conversation often about getting this written up, etc. And he's spoken to me about other women who are really struggling and how we feel it's important to pass this sort of new way of working on to them, as it's really changed my life really in the last couple of years, being able to have my catheter changed away, because for quite some time we were having to go under a GA. So I've now, after conversations with him, noted that there's a lot of women that go in to have their catheter changed still under a general anaesthetic because of certain issues, and he's asked, would I help with bettering their lives and overcoming obstacles for them and with them. So it's been a bit of a collaborative discussion between him and I, but I guess I did push him quite a bit with clinical appointments and chats, because I did feel it was really important to sort of to try and do what I could to help others with this new nugget of knowledge that myself and him had developed. And then Coloplast, the company that make bags, a lady called Jenny contacted me through my blog, and I've been working closely with her. So we're in discussions about motivational speaking coming forward, even if they're doing Zoom events, things like that I'd come in and give patient perspective to consultants working within the bladder sector.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. That's a very progressive approach from a doctor to listen to their patient and get patient feedback.
Yeah.
I think doctors get so caught up in the standard protocol, looking at textbook, what they learned in medical school. And, some of these doctors, of course, they continue their education. But when they initially went through medical school, we're talking, 20 years ago, things have changed. So to really listen to your patient and get that feedback from them is so critical. And so I love that actually happened for you. And now you're taking, your experience, your knowledge, he's listening to you, which in itself is amazing because not a lot of doctors listen. And now you've created this whole new protocol and procedure for treating patients and really helping, young people that are going through this and how to deal with it, how to live with it every day. So that's quite an incredible endeavor that you just took on. So I love that.
Thanks. I know we were having a little chat, weren't we, earlier on about how, you know, like you said, doctors who trained 20 or 30 years ago, things are different now. And I think as well, my condition, Fowler's, wasn't sort of founded as such until 30, 40 years ago now. So quite often some of these doctors feel that that's still quite a new condition and they don't place a lot of faith in it. So I've been told before, like, oh, if you just go home, have a hot bath, run some water and relax, you'll wee. Things like that, like very patronising and almost like trivialising my condition. And for me, I've been through a good couple of consultants now, but for me, Dr. Viney, my current consultant, he straight away was like, no, we need to look at where this pain's coming from and why you're in the position you are and how we can help you. And he was very good in trying to understand that how they were changing my catheter before clearly wasn't working. So what is it that I find difficult and how can they overcome that? Little things, even like we do it in a side room with sort of low lighting, and I have some sort of sedative medication beforehand, just orally, like a diazepam type medication to relax me prior to that. He lets my auntie come in with me, who's a nurse as well, and talk to me so that I've got a familiar face there. He does everything slow. He'll tell me exactly what he's doing when he's doing it. He'll ask my permission before he goes and plays around with my catheter and things like that. Like all of that, it takes the edge off, doesn't it? And it makes you feel listened to and heard and at ease. And I think that's so important because sometimes when you go in, you feel like you're the lay person and that they're the medical person, and you have to just go along with everything that they're saying and just deal with it and get on with it. And that can be quite frightening to feel like you haven't got a voice. So for him to make me feel a bit empowered within that procedure, and that it's going at my pace and I have some say and control in it was, massively life-changing, really.
Yeah, I think that alone is just so important. And even kind of going off of my experience, I saw my urologist a couple times in the last, year and a half, and finally got a diagnosis in February. And, the three things that were told to me was, one, he asked me, what have you done to help yourself? Mm-hmm. Which I thought was ridiculous. How can you help yourself if you don't know what's wrong with you? I mean, you can do your research, but essentially that's up to the medical professional to guide you, to let you know what's wrong. The second thing was that, I expressed not wanting to take pharmaceuticals. I wanted to do this naturally. I'm a huge advocate for it. And what I left with were 3 prescription drugs. Yeah. So he was not listening to me there. And the third thing that was said is there's nothing that you can do to help yourself really with this disease. You will be in pain for the rest of your life and you're just going to have to deal with it. Yeah. I literally am not kidding you, but I broke down in tears after hearing that. That's not an uplifting way. I don't care even if that is true and I'm going to be in pain for the rest of my life. You don't tell someone that when they just received news of a new diagnosis. That's not a great empathetic protocol to follow. And so, I harp on this a lot on the podcast, and I think a lot of people think I hate doctors, and I don't, because there's a lot of amazing doctors out there. But having that empathy and just kind of pulling your head away from just reading the standard procedure and looking at a textbook diagnosis, you have to have that human connection, especially when you're talking about an illness that, again, affects a very private area that we don't feel I openly talk about this now with people, but I can see the look in people's eyes when I say, oh, I have like a bladder inflammation disease. They kind of look grossed out for a second. So it's not an easy thing to talk about. And so just all the way around, it's very frustrating and you'd feel like you don't have a voice. So I 100% agree. And I hope this episode, some doctors listen to it, because I think this can really change the way that they handle treating this illness and any sort of bladder inflammation, any sort of any sort of chronic illness that causes pain, that's uncomfortable. I feel like you just don't get heard.
I agree. And like, I find it quite hard too with like bedside manners sometimes, like things like you said, things are delivered so poorly sometimes that we're left with this like terrible statement that's just been given to us. But because a doctor is delivering news that might not necessarily be positive news quite often within their day-to-day, job, I feel like that they just take that for granted, that actually you're having to hear that, and it's really frightening because it's so real for you because you're living it every single day and they're only seeing you for a snippet of that time. So I think that that's really difficult sometimes when you get a doctor whose bedside manner isn't great, because it's frightening when we're in a place where we feel so vulnerable, and then to have things delivered poorly is just, it's really hard. And I'm not saying for 1 minute every doctor does that, but I have experienced that more often than I have not. So I do totally empathise with what you're saying there. And after talking to other people, since my endeavour with B is for Bladder, I know that we're not alone in that. And I just, like you said, I hope some doctors are listening to this and maybe can rethink how they deliver things or how they listen to their patients, or, try and meet their patients in the middle, because I think it's a real working relationship you should have between your patient doctor, isn't it,
Absolutely. That's definitely well said. So I kind of want to get into, you mentioned this prior, but you're involved with your local radio. So I know this is probably, another avenue for you to spread the word and advocate for bladder health and chronic illnesses. But how did this opportunity come about, and what are some of the topics that you are discussing?
Yeah. Oh, that's so exciting, actually. It's kind of a new branch of Bees for Bladder. We've got a little podcast. I've only done my first episode the other week, so I'm a real rookie. I'm not quite there yet, as good as you are with the interviewing skills, but getting there. And yeah, it's great. It's called C is for Chronically Fabulous. So it is a way of spreading the word about bladder conditions. However, it touches upon many different chronic illnesses, and the idea is we interview people who are dealing with chronic health day to day, and it's sort of just, again, still based around that alphabetical theme. C is for Chronically Fabulous. They pick 3 letters that sort of relate back to their condition and sort of what they want to talk about, really, to spread awareness and, be an advocate for what they're going through. And we kind of try and make it as positive as possible, but as real as possible too. So yeah, it's a podcast based through Solihull Radio. So I'm from a place called Solihull in the UK. It's just outside of Birmingham. And yeah, it's just that exciting. So our first episode's coming out next weekend. So tune in to that. You can get it on Spotify. So I will be sure to link you up as well, so you can have a listen for me.
Definitely would love to listen to that episode. I think it's a great model and, again, very creative, kind of matching with the style of your blog. I love that it also focuses on other chronic illnesses as more of a broad topic, because many of us with IC or any sort of bladder health condition, we also generally suffer from probably another autoimmune issue or another chronic illness.
Yeah.
Usually get 2, I don't know, 2, 3, that's like the magic number. So a lot of us know that if one of our illnesses flares up, usually our bladder is going to flare as well. So, it's awesome that your local community saw a need for that, because you don't see that a lot.
Well, that's it, exactly. And I think, we're a small little town outside of Birmingham, but there is a good proportion of people suffering with something, every day, whether that's a chronic mental health condition or, even something that might seem as minor as, let's say, eczema. A good friend of mine suffers with eczema so bad that she had to have a year off work because her skin, she was a makeup artist, her skin was so inflamed from all products, etc. And she was having to bath twice a day with special ointments and things like that. Like, it was huge for her. She didn't want to leave the house. Her face, her arms, her legs was so inflamed, raw and sore that people thought, oh, eczema, but that's a chronic condition. It's a chronic health condition for her, and she's had to really battle that throughout the years. So I just think it's highlighting the podcast is highlighting things small and big and making us all feel like one big community to support each other, especially those that are involved within the invisible disability community as well. I think, it's really important, even though some of our disabilities are invisible, for us to feel like they are visible at times. So we don't feel so alone with them.
Yeah. It's important to give people that voice and just have that resource available. And yeah, I love that your local community really took note of that. I would love to see more things like that over here in the United States. Of course, there's a few great organizations over here like the IC Network and IC Association. But I would love to hear more podcasts or more radio shows, around just chronic illnesses in general. So I think that's really great. Do you have any additional thoughts or recommendations, any sort of tips on what one can do, or if you have any other resources that are available out there for people to look into? That would be great.
Yeah, so I guess top tips for me is, this might help you actually. I have got obviously mine's a suprapubic catheter, but I think you can do it with an IC catheter as well. I give myself bladder flushes once every couple of days, and my bladder's a neo bladder, so it's made out of part bowel. So I get quite a lot of slough and gunk through my catheter because I've got quite thick tissue lining my bladder. It's part bowel tissue, so it's quite mucousy. So I find if I flush my catheter through, it will drain a lot easier. And also the less slough in my bladder, the sort of more free-flowing my urine is, and it's less painful to sort of pass through the catheter. So doing a flush with saline solution like irrigation water and lidocaine, which is like a little 1% vial, and it's injection use only. I get that one because it comes in a gel as well. So not the gel, you want the liquid injection use only one. And I mix sort of 10 ml with 50 ml of saline and just flush my bladder through. And because the lidocaine has like a anesthetic property, it really helps to sort of relax my bladder wall and calm any spasms down that I get. So I find that a really helpful, useful tip. And sort of just taping my catheter up in the day, because I do live a near normal life. I work full time and I still manage to do exercise here and there when I'm having a good day and not having a flare up. So often if I take my catheter up, it will hold it into place, and it means I can sort of go about my day-to-day business without too much discomfort. Hot water bottles, heat is always great. Always got a heat patch, little heat pack in my bag, or a little patch I can stick on my back or my stomach if my bladder pain or kidney pain is quite bad. So yeah, I guess those are my top tips. But there's a lady that I think that you interviewed not long ago. Is it Zoe?
Yes, Actively Autoimmune is her Instagram handle.
Yeah.
She does Pilates, and amazing.
Yeah.
Very amazing.
Yeah, she's absolutely brilliant. She, I got her on Instagram, but I just find following her, she's always coming up with like helpful tips or, helpful hacks with a catheter, things that you can do to try and stop XYZ or help, different things. I find her brilliant. So if anyone's not following her, I would say too, because I think she's got great little highlight buttons as well on her Instagram. So you can watch back stories, which have her top tips on. And I've actually learned quite a lot from her. So I think that's that's also a great one, really, a really useful blogger to follow with a catheter.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's very important I know it's hard for us to do exercise, but it's important to keep moving, especially if you do have a lot of inflammation in your body. That really helps. So yeah, it was great interviewing her, and I just love that she's able to really promote working out with such a great form of exercise, Pilates, which is one of my favorite, and just really be able to try to live a normal life as much as possible and still work out. So definitely a great suggestion there.
Yeah.
Well, Aoife, I really appreciate you taking the time to be on the show today. It was great learning about your passion project and all of your efforts that you are putting into your community around chronic illness and bladder health. So thanks so much for joining me today.
You are so welcome. And I'm just so happy we can sort of be joined as a wider community as well across seas via technology. It's, a pleasure. So thanks so much.
Absolutely. It's great connecting worldwide. So I appreciate it. I'm glad we found each other on Instagram. So thank you so much for your time. And I also want to thank my audience for taking the time to listen to the Bladder Battle Podcast special series, I See in the Dark. Make sure you subscribe if you're listening on YouTube, or leave a rating or review on Spotify, Google, or Apple Podcast. And stay tuned for the next episode right here on the Bladder Battle Podcast.